Today in the episode, Trump gives Russian economy 6 months to live after imposing oil sanctions. Ukraine can strike targets 3,000 kilometers deep into Russian territory. Zelensky. Remembering our colleagues, report about Alyona Gramova and Yevhenii Karmazin. The United States has introduced new sanctions against Russia's 2 largest oil companies in a move aimed at pressuring Moscow to enter peace talks over its war in Ukraine. The announcement came just a day after U.S. President Donald Trump said his planned meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Budapest would be postponed indefinitely. Every time I talk to Vladimir, it's a good conversation, but nothing ever happens, Trump said. While the immediate economic effect on Russia is expected to be limited, the move marks a notable shift in Trump's foreign policy stance. The president had previously resisted imposing sanctions, insisting that such measures would only come after European countries stopped buying Russian oil. The Kremlin dismissed the new restrictions, claiming Russia was immune to their impact. The U.S. action follows similar steps by the United Kingdom, which recently sanctioned Rosneft and Lukoil, and by the European Union, which plans to ban Russian liquefied natural gas imports starting January 2027. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the decision, calling it a positive signal from Washington, and emphasizing that stronger international pressure could help pave the way for a ceasefire. On Wednesday, Trump criticized Putin for lacking seriousness about ending the war, saying he hoped the sanctions might force a breakthrough. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said the sanctions were necessary due to Putin's refusal to end this senseless conflict, noting that Rosneft and Lukoil serve as key financial pillars of the Kremlin's war effort. But Putin has rejected the significance of these sanctions.
They are, of course, serious for us, it's clear, and they will have certain consequences. However, they will not have a significant impact on our economy.
We have repeatedly said that the European Union's unilateral restrictions were ineffective and that the current EU elites were unable to recognize the obvious fact. The sanctions they are imposing against Russia are not working as planned. The sanctions they are imposing against Russia primarily work against the European Union. Brussels' ability to expand sanctions against our country has largely been exhausted.
The reaction of the United States president was not awaited for long. He recently commented on that during a press briefing.
Good, I'm glad he feels that way. That's good. I'll let you know about it in 6 months from now, okay? Let's see how it all works out.
China's major national oil firms, PetroChina, Sinopec, CNOOC, and Zhenhua Oil, have decided to suspend seaborne Russian oil purchases, at least in the short term, due to concerns about secondary sanctions, the sources said. None of the companies immediately commented. The decision follows similar moves by Indian refiners, who plan to sharply reduce Russian oil imports in compliance with the new U.S. sanctions imposed over the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. A simultaneous drop in demand from Russia's 2 biggest customers, China and India, is expected to strain Moscow's oil revenues, force importers to seek alternative supplies, and potentially drive up global crude prices. OPEC is prepared to raise oil production and lift its current output limits if necessary to compensate for potential supply shortages following new U.S. sanctions on Russia's major oil producers, Kuwait's oil minister said. In a major policy shift, the Trump administration imposed sanctions on Russia's largest energy firms, Lukoil and Rosneft, prompting an immediate 5% surge in global oil prices. Kuwait is among several OPEC Plus member states that have already been gradually increasing production this year to regain market share after years of cuts. At its most recent meeting, the alliance agreed to raise output by 137,000 barrels per day starting in November. EU leaders have agreed to help support Ukraine's financial needs for the next 2 years, but stopped short of releasing billions of euros in frozen Russian cash to help fund the country's defense on Thursday night. A decision to use 140 billion euros in Russian assets held in a Belgian clearinghouse was pushed back until December after concerns were raised by Belgium. The controversial still most necessary move would be on top of sanctions the bloc has imposed on Russia, the latest targeting the Kremlin's oil revenues. The Brussels meeting came ahead of a London summit on Friday, where UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer will urge European leaders to boost long-range missile supplies to Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to attend the meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing alongside NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, and Netherlands' Dick Schoof. Other leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, will join virtually. European ministers held yet another talks in Brussels on Thursday about how billions of euros worth of frozen Russian cash could be made available to Ukraine as a so-called reparations loan. Many EU governments had hoped the leaders would back the plan and request the European Commission, the EU's executive body, to work out a formal legal proposal in the coming weeks. Because it really is that simple. It is an internationally legally recognized fact. Russia started this war and killed, burned and raped, annexed Ukrainian land and abducted Ukrainian children, and obviously should pay for reconstruction of the damage it caused, especially if these money already are held in Europe. These are the money that Russian terrorist Putin hold in EU banks and will use to do more terror if released to him. So the international community should have seen it as it is. Aggressors' money should have been released in favor of Ukraine, which is a victim of Russian aggression. But the final text, adopted after a marathon discussion, stopped short of greenlighting the plans. Instead, it asked the Commission for options for financial support based on an assessment of Ukraine's financing needs. Russia's assets should remain immobilized until Russia ceases its war of aggression against Ukraine and compensates it for the damage caused by its war, the declaration added. What is that? An attempt to get one more leverage over the Kremlin? Could be. What we know is that the aim is now for EU leaders to iron out the remaining concerns at another summit in December. This is a topic that is certainly not trivial. It's very complex. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said following Thursday's talks. It was also very clear that there are points to be clarified, she said, while some officials sounded a positive note just as well.
The bloc has committed to ensure that Ukraine's financial needs will be covered for the next 2 years. Russia should take good note of this. Ukraine will have the financial resources it needs to defend itself. Antonio Costa, European Council President.
Whatever happens, here is the main paradigm that Russia wants the international community to exercise. Whatever happens on the border, it wasn't them. Russian military aircraft violated Lithuanian airspace on the afternoon of October 23rd. A fighter jet and a refueling aircraft entered Lithuania's airspace for 18 seconds, and NATO aircraft were scrambled to intercept them, according to the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense and President Gitanas Nausėda. On October 23rd, around 6 p.m., the Lithuanian Air Force detected a border violation near Kybartai, a Russian Su-30 fighter jet and an Il-78 refueling aircraft, the statement said. It is believed the Russian aircraft were conducting refueling exercises in the Kaliningrad region. They crossed approximately 700 meters into Lithuanian airspace and stayed for about 18 seconds.
I strongly condemn the violation of Lithuanian airspace recently by the fighter jet and transport vehicle transport plane of Russian Federation from Kaliningrad region side. This is cruel violation of international law and territorial sovereignty of Lithuania, and we have to react to this.
After that, the governments of several European countries, including Lithuania, said they were ready to shoot down Russian planes in case of a new invasion of their airspace. This caused hysteria in the Kremlin, especially after the Lithuanian defense minister gave an example of what NATO's attitude to these not us Russian provocations should be.
3 Russian fighter jets over Tallinn is one more hard proof that NATO's border in the northeast is being tested for a reason. We need to mean business. PS Turkey set an example 10 years ago. Some food for thought. Dovile Shakalyan, defense minister of Lithuania.
So maybe if Russians really want the international community to accept their "it was not us" paradigm, I guess there is a way. Next time, NATO just shoots the planes down and then just says, all good, the Kremlin was right, it wasn't Russian. Since the very first days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Journalist Alyona Gramova, cameraman Yevhenii Karmazin, and special correspondent Oleksandr Kolychev have worked tirelessly in the Donetsk region. Day after day, they brought stories from the front lines about the courage and resilience of Ukrainian defenders and about the suffering of civilians living under constant Russian shelling. Through their reports, the world learned the truth about the crimes committed by the Russian army against the people of Ukraine. For Alyona, Yevhenii, and Oleksandr, journalism was not just a profession. It was a mission. They went where others would not dare, documenting the war as it unfolded, often under direct threat from rockets and drones. They believed that showing the truth was their duty, no matter the danger. How they are remembered by their colleagues and the viewers of UATV in our report.
2 missile strikes were launched by Russian forces last night on the city of Selidove in the Donetsk region. Around 2 p.m., Russian troops struck Kostiantynivka. 11 civilians were killed in a massive overnight shelling of Dobropilya in the Donetsk region. This is what one of the central districts of Pokrovsk looks like now, after yesterday's Russian missile strike. To the shelter! To the shelter!
Alyona Gramova, war correspondent for the UATV channel. She was always one of the first to arrive at the scene of attacks, showing the world the war crimes committed by Russian aggressors. She used to say she couldn't do otherwise. Back in 2014, she had already been forced to flee her hometown after it was occupied by Russian forces and moved to Kramatorsk. And after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, she made an important personal decision.
From the first days, my editors told me, you can evacuate. You can move to Kiev, to Dnipro, you can work from there. But I always said, this is my home. I've already been displaced once in my life. I didn't want to go through that again. So I made my choice. I'll stay until the very end.
Alyona entered journalism 6 years ago. She says she had never even considered it as a career. Her first report happened by chance. Since 2021, when she joined UATV, she became a war correspondent. In Donetsk region, Alyona always worked with her team and called them the best.
Come on, tell them. Why do you always go quiet when I start filming?
Yevhenii Karmazin was born in Kramatorsk. He covered events across the Donetsk region.
If you didn't download Stalker 2, just come to Pokrovsk. It's like playing the real thing.
In this video, Yevhenii Karmazin, cameraman for the UATV channel, spending time with his family, his parents, wife, and young son. After the full-scale invasion began, Yevhenii evacuated his family to a safer place. In Dnipro, he began working with a colleague from Kharkiv, who had also temporarily moved away from the front line in 2022.
I remember our first meeting so well. Yevhen came up to me, hugged me, and said, "Hi, I'm Yevhenii. We'll work together. I can do everything. We'll make it work." And he was right. Until Kharkiv region was liberated, we worked in Dnipro, and we were a real team, a true team.
Sometime later, Yevhenii returned to Kramatorsk to continue documenting the horrors of Russia's war against Ukraine. They always worked as a trio, Alyona, Yevhenii, and Oleksandr Kolychev, always covering for one another under constant threat from Russian drones and missiles.
We're tempting fate already. It's time to go.
On the morning of October 23rd, Alyona, Yevhenii, and Oleksandr were, as usual, working in Kramatorsk. The crew was at a gas station filming the aftermath of a recent Russian shelling. At that moment, their vehicle was attacked by a Russian Lancet drone. Alyona Gramova and Yevhenii had an open fracture. He is currently in intensive care.
This news was a terrible blow to our newsroom. Everyone who worked with Alyona and Yevhen will tell you, they were not only true professionals, but people you could always rely on. They always wanted to be first on the scene, to show the world the real truth about Russia's war crimes. And they always wanted the world not to remain silent.
Alyona and Yevhenii are among the Ukrainian media workers killed by Russia while performing their professional duties since the start of the full-scale invasion.
Russia is not only committing war crimes, including against journalists, it is doing so deliberately. And when it comes to journalists, this is particularly egregious because under all conventions, journalists are not legitimate military targets. They have the right to work. It's clear that Russia is now deliberately targeting civilians and journalists who are doing their jobs.
The Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine plans to establish a special commission to investigate war crimes committed against Ukrainian journalists.
Психологічний стан дійсно дуже важкий. Можливо, десь навіть
The psychological pressure is really heavy, and my health sometimes suffers. When you wear a heavy bulletproof vest for several hours a day, sometimes 5 or 6, it takes a toll. But despite all that, I have no regrets.
Але незважаючи на все це, я ні про що не шкодую.
Alyona Gramova was 43 years old. Yevhenii Karmazin was 33, reported by Natalia Husak and the entire UATV team.
It was Henry Keane. Thank you for standing with Ukraine. Please subscribe so as to stay tuned to what is happening in the world, shown from the Ukrainian perspective. Goodbye.